Now here's a series I feel has been long overdue for my channel. Sly Cooper is one of my favorite franchises from the PlayStation and one of my favorite video game series ever, from Thievius Raccoonus right up to Thieves in Time. It was a series that threw me off when I first saw it, but after sitting down with it for a few hours, there was no turning back and I became a lifelong fan. If any of you have seen Cat Icarus's retrospectives on the Sly games, I went down the exact same path he did. I started with Sly 3, then Sly 2, and finally Sly 1. And though I played 2 and 3 on the PS2, I didn't play the first game until getting the Sly collection for Christmas in 2010. And since I'm coming from such a weird perspective, I'll be talking about stuff from the other games here and there, so if you want to avoid spoilers, there's your warning, holding nothing back from here on out. So without further ado, welcome one and all to the Cooper Marathon. After playing Sly 2 and 3 to death, going back to where it all began was so weird. Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus looked like a Sly game, but for all the familiar, there was as much different too. What I knew as an open-world action-adventure game was now something more akin to Spyro the Dragon or Crash Bandicoot. Each world now had levels going from point A to point B, they were 3 to 5 minutes long, there was a life system with icons in the shape of Sly's face, and none of this 3 playable characters stuff. This was purely a Sly outing. You sorta kinda control Murray in the van for a few missions, but for 99% of the game, it's strictly Sly. Speaking of Murray, his portrayal here was jarring too. My brother and I knew him as the Murray, larger than life and not afraid of anybody, but here he was in Sly 1 afraid of his own shadow, and we thought, is this some kind of joke? Sucker Punch did think about making him a Rambo-esque character with huge machine guns, but felt that was too much, and the turret sections with Sly are what remain of that idea. Still, it was crazy to see where Murray got his start, like some weird prequel story. The big thing that took some getting used to was the gameplay. Where the sequels have enemies of varying strength, here every guard dies in one hit, and Sly himself has no health to speak of. It was so strange getting hit or falling off a cliff and not getting a chance to fight back. Still, nabbing a couple of lucky horseshoes took some of the edge off and were never in short supply if I had enough coins. Though I was surprised that was the only purpose coins served in this game. For a while, I thought since Sly 1 deviated so much from what the series would be known for that it was the weakest entry by default. Over the years though, I've gained more respect for what it does differently, and now when I think about which Sly is my favorite, Sly 1 gets brought up a lot more often. For one, I love how easily digestible this game is. The sequels are much larger in scope, but this one's nice and condensed. You could have a huge chunk of the game done in one sitting and not even realize it. When getting footage, I beat each world in under an hour, and that was with multiple deaths and trying to beat some levels 100%. And when going for extra stuff, I feel more inclined to do so here, like with the clue bottles for example. In later games, these things are spread across any given overworld and getting them all will take some time. But since Sly 1's levels are so small, finding them is pretty easy, and for ones that are more hidden, a little detective work is really all you need to find them all. As a reward, you get new moves that aren't necessary to beat the game but do make it more fun. Then there's the Master Thief sprints, essentially time attack mode. I found these ones as addictive as the ones in the Crash Bandicoot series. Every time I slipped up, I immediately wanted to go again. And some of the aforementioned power-ups you get make them a lot less stressful. I can't imagine doing half of them without the roll move at my disposal. Most levels in this game have like 3 different ways to tackle them, and that is so ingenious. Whenever I fire up Sly 1, I know I'm going to have a good time. Sly's never been a slouch for presentation, from the games themselves right to the very packaging they come in. The series instruction manuals are some of my favorites from any video game ever. The first 2 are written from the perspective of Sly and Bentley, and I love how with each game they get more wear and tear. Sly 1's also has a "This book belongs to" blurb at the start, like it's your own personal Thievius Raccoonus. If I was the kind of guy to desecrate my manuals, jotting down notes in here would feel like writing entries into my own thief book. Now for the game's art style, I might like it more than the other games in the trilogy. It reminds me a a lot of rares grabbed by the ghoulies, and for those who don't know, just hear me out. That game had a mantra of no straight edges to go for a more timeless look, and in Sly 1, things have a jagged, crooked edge to them. It's like they took all the environments and twisted them around by hand, and as a result, they've held up better than the ones in Ratchet & Clank and even Jak and Daxter. The use of color, I say, is done best here too. The sequels have plenty of color, but go for a more muted, realistic look. Especially in Sly 2. I think of a Sly 2 level and think that one is all brown, or all green, or all purple. But Sly 1's color scheme really grabs your attention, and even in more drab places it's super lively. World 1 takes place on a rainy night in Wales, but I remember the shades of green, blue, yellow, and how much I love the look of this place. And if you're playing the HD collection, it looks even better. The soundtrack to this game is also pretty unique. You think of Sly Cooper music, you think smooth jazz, calm ambiance, and big orchestral scores, but Sly 1 leans more on the funkier side. This outing was done by Ashif Hakik, who also composed for games like Crash Nitro Kart and Tomba 2, and he said the music was inspired by the overall look of Sly Cooper. It also took notes, from the work of composers with credits like Cowboy Bebop, Looney Tunes, and Pink Panther. It's a dynamic soundtrack that goes calm when out of sight and ramps up when fighting guards, so while different to the sequels, the fingerprints are all still there. Now, if I had a gun to my head and was told to hum 5 tracks from Sly 2 or 3, I don't think I could, but Sly 1 has several where I can recognize a melody. Some of my favorites include the Hideout theme, Two to Tango, Piranha Lake, and the boss fight with Mugshot. The HD collection remixes some of these tracks, and I don't know how or why they did, but some revisions sound pretty good. There's an alternate version of Piranha Lake's theme used in the level Down Home Cooking that sounds pretty different from the original, but I think it's really cool. I mean, it sounds like I'm in a video arcade from outer space or something! The level end jingles are also great, and I've always loved Murray's for sounding so bumbling and goofy. The best ambient track in the game for me is the hub theme from Ms. Ruby's Swamp. You need something mystical and spooky in your life? Look no further than this. Little story, back when I made my video on Canadian TV and needed some ethereal sounding music for my Cyber 6 segment, Ms. Ruby's Swamp instantly popped in my head and it worked perfectly. Even some people in the comments section took notice, and that is so cool. That track is just one of the reasons the swamp is my favorite world in the game. It doesn't get much cooler than a haunted hotspot in the heart of Haiti. Here you've got giant mosquitoes, voodoo rats, and terrifying monster snakes. There's also these cool turtle guys that throw their flaming heads at you. They're like something out of Donkey Kong Country. And when you get close to them, they don't even attack you, they just cower in fear. I didn't know that until recently, but I love that. One of Sly's biggest draws is the voice acting, and being the guy that I am, I wanted to shed some light on it. Lots of games in the 90s and 2000s were done in Seattle, Washington, and given Sucker Punch is based there, it makes sense they went with local talent. It's always cool hearing a cast different from the usual fare, and this group has always been especially strong. Every Sly fan knows Carmelita has a different voice for each game, and hearing her debut voice threw me off the first time, but now I'd say it's my favorite of the trilogy.
The only one making wrong turns is you, Sly. I'd suggest you surrender before I paralyze you with my good friend, the shock pistol.
Some deliveries are a bit flat, but her tone and accent are on point for me. I was curious if her actor did anything else, and currently she's one of the main characters on Nickelodeon's The Casa Grandes, and I'm actually legit happy to hear that. Bentley's a real standout here. He and Sly have some hilarious back and forth, and even Murray gets some good laughs too. They're not quite the close-knit group I know them from in the sequels, but they rag on each other in ways only close friends can. This line in particular was always a favorite for me and my brother.
Those stupid monkeys! They got lucky and beat me! I'm just not used to driving on the wrong side of the road.
Wrong side of the... Just get the key, Murray.
And would you believe me if I told you 80% of the Fiendish Five was voiced by one guy? From Raleigh to Clockwork, they were voiced by Kevin Blackton, and their voices are so distinct from one another. I'm the kind of guy who picks out who's who in a given production, but if Sly's actor Kevin Miller didn't confirm it, I never would have guessed it. It was so sad to hear he passed away in 2017. His work brought me and many others so much joy over the years. Now, there's always some fun to be had with voiceover, and Sly has quite a few lines that my brother and I have turned into little inside jokes. It's like Star Fox 64, where some lines are said with such memorable delivery, and once you hear them, they're stuck with you for life. In other cases, you'll just hear a weird noise and wonder what the heck that was, like this laugh Mugshot does. Like, what is that? Like, Panda King does a dying cough here, and it sounds like they took one take, pitched it down a few times, and spliced in some other grunts for a quick fix. Like, Kevin Blackton just wasn't in that day, but we have to do something. Plus, it sounds like it was recorded in a tin can, but I don't mean to rag, it's just funny to talk about. Sly 1's also the kind of game that carries an E rating and gets away with more than I thought it could, even more so than the sequels. Sure, there's characters smoking cigars and drinking alcohol like in a classic cartoon, but there's other things in here that surprised me. Like in the swamp, the mosquitoes will take a suck out of you and then they splurt out your blood, like, ugh. During this mission, Bentley also lets out an "oh my god," which is pretty unheard of in kids games, and coupled with its spelling and how it was said, I laughed the first time I saw it. They also managed to sneak in the word "kick ass" on one of the newspaper headlines, and in the game's bonus videos, a blooper for one of the commercials has another swear slip under the radar.
Where's the cat? Show me the cat! I don't see no damn cat! Show me the cat!
Yeah!
All this, and the game was rated E for only mild violence in 2002. I guess as long as people weren't getting their heads cut off or something like that, the ESRB didn't seem to care too much. It's sort of like how Cuphead was rated E when it first came out, and then a few months later it got bumped up to an E10 for like tobacco and mild language and stuff like that. It's just interesting to see. Now, you can't talk Sly without mentioning its gallery of villains, and we've got some good ones here. Though there'd be many great villains to come, the Fiendish Five will always have the distinction of messing with Sly's family and setting the story in motion. Raleigh the Frog is barely mentioned outside this game, but when I see him, I think he was there when Sly's parents were killed. What a scumbag. You get to know these guys throughout their chapters, and their presence is always felt to some degree. Then when facing off against them, it feels great to put them in their place and take back what's yours. I also like how when you take one of them out, they'll talk up the next member in line like, "Oh, you thought I was bad? Just wait till you deal with this guy. They're 10 times worse." Made me excited to see what was next, and in my case, I was more excited to see guys I knew from later games in their debut appearance. Sly 3 has a flashback fight with Panda King, but my brother and I wondered if that whole fight was in the first game. Then when we got to Panda King's chapter, all we could think of was the upcoming fight, and to hear the opening speech and Panda King call out his moves just like in Sly 3, that was so awesome. But the boss we were truly anxious to see was Clockwork. We heard all about him in Sly 2, and even though it wasn't exactly the same character, it still laid out the facts. This guy is dangerous, scary, and borderline immortal. The second I heard Clockwork's voice, it sent a shiver down my spine.
You sentimental fool. Empathy has always been the downfall of the Cooper clan.
After all these years, we finally hear what he sounds like, and it's terrifying. He may not have as many appearances as some other video game villains out there, but he's still one of my all-time favorites. And while Ruby Swamp is my favorite of the first 4 worlds, Clockworks is a total adrenaline rush. Things get a little darker, the stakes get even higher, and everyone gets their time in the spotlight. Even Bentley comes in for an 11th hour save, and even though it's short, it's one of my favorite moments of the game. When that music boots up, it's exhilarating. You feel like a hacking god out to save the world, and the visuals, look at them, they're a complete trip! Kinda wish all of Sly's hacking levels looked like this now. Then soon after comes the fight with Clockwork. Not the best boss fight in the game, but for someone who knew where the series went after this, it's like I was playing a flashback from the sequel in real time, like a reverse Panda King if that makes sense. Also cool to see the origin of Clockwork's electric electric dream catchers or whatever they are. Upon his defeat, Clockwork swears he'll always live on in some way. Scary how accurate that turns out to be, and it's a great finale to the whole adventure. In terms of how you can play Sly, you've got the original on PS2 and the HD version on PS3. I've said this with remakes and remasters before, but I try not to dismiss the original if there's a reason to go back, and the big reason here, well, it's more stable. I don't know if anyone else has dealt with this, but my copy has this nasty habit of wiping save files seemingly at random. When firing up Sly 1 after some time, all I had was a 13% complete file, and there were 2 times where the game randomly crashed on me. Second time this happened, I had to hard reset my PS3 to fix the problem. And I'll be the millionth person to tell you Miss Ruby's boss fight is out of sync, but when I first played this through the collection, I didn't know that at the time, so I didn't mind. During my recordings, however, it took me several attempts to beat her on PS3, but on PS2, got it in one go. You may also know that after beating a level's Master Thief sprint, you unlock developer commentary for it, which is really cool. If you bought this collection physically, they are not on here, but if you nab it off the PSN store, they are, which is annoying. I swear, the collections for Ratchet, Jack, and Sly all have something that keeps them from being the de facto version, and at this point, I'm more impressed than anything. If you just want to play the game, the collection will do just fine, but if you can, get the original on top of that, and that goes for the sequels too. For the original bonuses, you still get the commercials, a making of from Sucker Punch, and the Japanese version of Sly 1's intro. Always thought it was so cool how they went the extra mile to even make this, and until I started writing this video, I didn't even know there was a Japanese ending either. I thought Carmelita sounded good before, but in this, she is sounding fine. You go, girl. The Japanese version also has a 3-minute theme song called Blackjack, performed by a jazz band called Tokyo Ska Paradise. It sounds really cool, but I might get in trouble if I play it here. You better find it on your own. And coupled with some proposed artwork I stumbled across, it seems like Japan almost pulled a Crash Bandicoot with Sly to make him more palatable for Japanese audiences. But whatever plans they had didn't seem to take off too well. Japan didn't even get Sly 3 until the HD collection came out. Yeesh. This could have been a one-and-done adventure, and while that would have sucked, Sly 1 is still a neat little package that knows what it wants to do and does it with flying colors. I still can't confidently say which game is my favorite, but Sly 1 does a lot right that even the sequels don't quite nail in my eyes. It's a strong start for the series, and if you were in the same boat that I was, give it another look and see what you get from it today. Now that's all I've got to say for Sly 1, but make sure you join me next time as we're gonna talk about Sly 2, Band of Thieves, as the Cooper Marathon continues. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed what you saw today. If you did, feel free to give this video a like, share with a friend, subscribe, check out my social media pages, check out my Patreon page where I go into like behind the scenes stuff and other things like that, all that stuff that I always go on about. And if you've got any fond memories of Sly yourself, feel free to share them in the comments below. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of the videos I got on screen. I really enjoyed making them. Hopefully you'll enjoy watching them. Hopefully. And with all that said, I will see you guys next time. Later.